Hi, I'm Rick Harrison. I'm president of Rick Harrison Site Design and also Neighborhood Innovations. In the mid-1970s, as head of planning for Herman Bloom Engineers with my background in engineering and surveying, I began developing software for my own use. Eventually, Hewlett-Packard called me and we collaborated for the next 20 years throughout the 80s and 90s, and we sold thousands of our system, which we called SiteComp, to cities, engineers, surveyors, the military. Every air guard base in the world uses SiteComp for their precision mapping. Rick Harrison Site Design was a spin-off from Land Innovation, specifically as an R&D company to develop new methods of developing land. In the late 1980s, we spun off from Land Innovation, my design studio, specifically to discover new methods of geometry to develop land. From that initial time to today, we have over 1,700 developments in 48 states and 18 nations designed with these methods, made possible by the software technology we were developing in concert. The results that we have today redefines the land development industry. This improves everything from the initial land surveying, going into planning, then the civil site engineering, and then the architecture, merging everything together into one holistic solution that's super easy to learn. For example, when you look at our user interface, there are no commands. We have a very simple system. You don't have to look all over the screen. We have the output in one area, very logical buttons, no commands. We're using the 3-button mouse instead of having to do a command and enter, do a command and enter, do a command and enter. A 3-button mouse, so you just tap keys and you get your work done with so much less effort and so much faster, and it's actually fun to use. And I don't know anybody that's ever said CAD was fun to use. Another huge advantage that we have in our patented software is that we don't have point numbers for land surveying. We're using the objects themselves. When the surveyor goes out in the field, he's not collecting point numbers. That's how computers think. We go back to the days when things were much simpler by looking at objects. And when we look at the line work to this objects, we're not using lines that stack on top of each other to add all this complexity in CAD, which means you need all these layers to get anything done. Instead, we fuse these corners, which actually makes things a lot more easier and more powerful. And while GIS is a spatial system, CAD is terrible at spatial data. And what I mean by spatial data is we live in a world of surfaces. Everything has a surface, it's space. We think in terms of surfaces and not lines and arcs and the drawing, but the actual physical surfaces, that man-made surfaces that impact our growth. So we're not talking about apples to apples when we look at LandMentor versus CAD or GIS. We're talking about a far more powerful package. And now I want to touch on the elephant in the room, which is 3D. Yes, some consultants produce 3D plans, and maybe they're using Lumion and charging the clients a fortune to create a video or images. What we wanted to do when we developed LandMentor is the ability to easily go from a 2D working environment that everybody's using in CAD, but deliver 3D as a normal part of the deliverables, but not just 3D in a video or some images, but interactive 3D. In other words, we're using video gaming that allows us to be interactive with the 3D, live action, move about the site, go into homes, because if you're using 3D and you have a preset video and you go to a planning commission member and the planning commission member says, yeah, but what's it look like here? Or a neighbor says, what's it going to look like out my window? You can't do that with a pre-done 3D. In a critical meeting, you want the ability to be interactive easily and say, hey, this is what it looks like out the window. That is not enough because you can't feel the space. So back in 2015, we got on the Oculus development program, and we were the first in the world to use 3D for for city planning approvals. And when you put a VR headset on a planning commission member and they are now transported into your proposal and they could feel the space and they could see this beautiful development. However, we see VR as the future of city planning. There are over 30,000 government entities in the United States. They have a planning commission and a council that judge land developments, and they're certainly not going to judge it correctly on a 2D plan. We have the only technology that can go from a normal work environment or importing CAD files to easily create the 3D base for land development to make it possible for cities to affordably use 3D in the judgment of submittals to the city. And because our 3D is plug and play VR, all they have to do is plug in a headset and they're immersed into the future. And they could see that new cell tower, how it's going to affect what's around it, but they could feel it. And that's the big difference. But from a city's perspective, it gets even better. Because while we're creating that 3D base, we're using our spatial intelligence of LandMentor to communicate if that proposal is efficient or not. So for example, someone submits a subdivision created in CAD to the regulatory minimums, which is likely to result in about 20 to 30% waste in public street to gain that density. If the city could feed back at that time to the developer, wait a second, you've got a mile of street that you're developing that you don't need and we don't want to maintain. And the cost of that mile of street, by the way, is going to be around $10 million that you don't necessarily want to spend, which increases the price of all those homes that you're going to build by $10,000 on each home. We suggest, while you have time at this concept plan, to go back to the drawing board, because here's where the waste is, and we would recommend that your engineer come up with a more efficient design. It'll make you more money, and we don't have all the street that we're going to have to maintain forever. No existing technology or system has even addressed any of this. LandMentor is a complete system. There are no modules. There are no extra costs. It includes the education in the basics of engineering, land surveying, advanced land planning. They have been the results of our 3 decades of work with our R&D company and how architecture relates to the site. It empowers cities to make better decisions that will absolutely save them many millions of dollars, if not more. And it empowers consultants to be able to serve the cities with this new era of consulting, as well as serve the private industry with far better solutions.